All right, everybody. So we are going to be building our calculator, and we're going to be starting with this income section on our template. We're going to be doing a couple different things right here, but just as kind of like the general goal that we have, the kind of the purpose of the spreadsheets in general, the whole reason why we do this is because if I was just putting in numbers, it's like the equivalent of writing it down on paper. And what we have going on here in this template is not only we're going to be factoring in the stuff that we're making in a year and spending in a year, we're breaking it up by month. And again, the reason we break it up by month is because typically that's how often we get paid. That's how often that we got to get charged stuff, right? We typically will be, a lot of our major bills will come in a monthly fashion. And so doing a month by month budget is a lot more manageable to keep track of than it is to try and keep track of it over the course of a whole year. But a spreadsheet can help organize it. Now, had we been just inputting numbers into this, we would have to go through box by box and try with the calculator, try and calculate all this stuff. And literally at the end of this, there'll be hundreds of things that can be calculated. But here's the massive power of a spreadsheet tool. We'll be able to change a single box, and I'll demonstrate this a couple times today and throughout the week. But we'll be able to change a single value in a box, and everything will automatically update at the click of a button. It'll be a massively powerful tool. It'll be basically like doing a single calculation on this, and all the individual calculations will be pretty basic, but having to do all of them will be overwhelming. That's why the spreadsheet is way more powerful than this guy. So let's jump right in. Our first task is going to be dealing with this fixed income. Just to remind you guys, what is fixed income? Fixed income refers to what we would call a salary position. Okay. Many of you right now that are making money do not have salary positions. There might be an exception if one of you like works for family or something like that. Maybe they give you some form of a salary for right now. But many of you right now have part-time jobs. And I got asked this in the last period. They're like, well, how would I keep track of my budget right now, like in my real life today? In that case, you would be making what's called flexible income, right? Part-time jobs are flexible because it really depends on how much you're needed, how busy it is, and maybe you get a raise along the way, but those kinds of things fluctuate. Fixed income is different. Okay, this is like at the beginning of the year when we did career exploration, when you figure out what a salary was for a position, like say for a teacher that makes $46,000 in a year. Okay, that's a contract that says like in the year we've agreed to pay you $46,000. So in order to figure out what I make in the month of January, for instance, I would just take that number and divide by 12 for 12 months in a year. And I can expect the same exact salary in February, in March, all the way through to December. All right. That's called a fixed income. And a salary position is nice because that's very predictable. All right. It will be the same each month. So doing that, let's just pick a random fixed income for right now. Let's put in 60,000. All right. Yours may be different. Right. And you'll notice it adjusted mine to like this long decimal. I'll deal with this in a second. Let me make this a little more compact. Okay. I'll deal with it in a second. I'll show you. Yours may just show the number 60,000 without any decimal places. That's okay. I'll show you how we'll reformat this to make it money in just a minute. All right. So for right now, let's just pick a random one like $60,000. No real rhyme or reason to it. Many of your jobs will have very different salary payments. Okay. But if I did make $60,000 in a year, based on my contract or whatever, if I wanted to figure out what I made in the month of January, I would simply divide by 12, okay, for 12 months in a year. Now, if I were to just do that in a calculator, it would tell me I would get $5,000 in the month of January on the other. Now, I'm not going to write in the number 5,000 on the spreadsheet. Instead, I'm going to make a calculator, all right? And here's how we make a calculator. In order to tell this spreadsheet that I'm going to create a calculator, I'm going to start with this symbol. Equals. As soon as I start a phrase right here with an equals sign, I've just told the spreadsheet that I'm about to create a calculator. Now, this calculator is not going to be particularly complex. All we're going to do is for the month of January is going to take that $60,000 and divide by 12. Okay. So in order to do that, instead of typing in $60,000 right here, instead, I want to base it off of a box or what we call a cell in the spreadsheet, namely this guy. And you'll notice when I clicked on that box, not only did it highlight that box, but it gave me this B4 designation. What is B4? B refers to column B, row 4. All right. So what I've just told is instead of typing in $60,000, I'm basing it off of a box. The reason why I'm doing that is because maybe that box changes, particularly for you if you're exploring some other career that doesn't likely have a $60,000 salary. Maybe it's way more, maybe it's less. Okay. But I'm going to take that box and then I'm going to divide by 12. The division symbol here is going to be this backslash symbol. All right. You'll find that in the lower right-hand portion of your keyboard, but that backslash symbol is the equivalent of division. Many of you are used to this with doing different calculator things on Google and stuff. I'm going to divide by 12. No magic thing happening here with 12. Just put in the number 12. Right. And when I'm done with that calculator, now I hit enter and you'll notice 5,000 pops up. Nothing super magical there. All it did was it took that $60,000 and divided it by 12. 5,000 popped out the other side. That could have been done on this guy. Nothing really magical there happening other than the fact that now here's what will happen. Let me demonstrate this real quick. What happens if I were to change this number to say like $50,000? Because I made it a box rather than just a number in that square, if I do that, you'll notice the number automatically adjusts. If I were to change it to say like 40,000, number changes again, right? This is the power of a spreadsheet tool. Now, this is only a single box. What we'll find is that as we fill this spreadsheet out, it will do all these calculations at the click of a button. Okay. So again, if I change this to back to the $60,000, just to kind of keep it uniform, we'll say it goes back to the 5,000. Great. Now, if I want to do the same thing for February, March, all the way through to December, it'd be very tedious to do that little calculator thing time and time again, particularly if I had to do that with all of the rest of the spreadsheet. So instead, we're going to do, if you click back on this January box, you'll notice a bold box in that lower right-hand corner right there. Okay. Now, if I were to click and drag this box all the way through to December, what I'm telling this spreadsheet to do is to do this same calculator all the way through my calendar. So if I do that, you're going to notice something like this pop up. Okay. Now, obviously, what I want, if this is a fixed income, I want all of these boxes to read $5,000. Okay. Quite obviously, they don't, because here's what's happening. If I were to click on any of these individual boxes, okay, if I were to click on any of these individual boxes, up here in the function bar, you'll notice this in the top left corner of your spreadsheet. It's telling me what the calculator is reading. Now, notice here for, say, the month of February, okay, it says C4 divided by 12. Well, C4 is this blank box here, which is why it's saying like, all right, well, nothing's there. Divide that by 12. 0 divided by 12 is what gives me 0. But I didn't want it to divide this box. I want it to stay on this box. So here's what we're going to do. Go back to your January. Okay, go back to your January. And up here in the function bar where it took this B4 box and divided it by 12, click in that function bar. Here's what we're going to do. This is unique language for this spreadsheet calculator. Throw in a $ or shift 4 on your keyboard in front of the B. Then with your arrow key, go over in front of that 4 and put in another $. So your calculator should read $B, $4. And it's still divided by 12. All right. But let's watch what happens. Let's see if anything changed. If I hit enter, nothing happened. All right. But here's the important thing to understand. It still divided this box by 12 and it's still going to be $5,000. So the calculator still does its job. But now let's watch what happens when I take that bold box in the lower corner. And now I'm going to click and drag that all the way through to December. Now it's $5,000 all the way through. Here's what that $ did and what the language meant for this spreadsheet calculator. That $ that we have in that function bar, what that $ does is it locks in that box, because naturally what the calculator wants to do is when you click and drag a calculation, it wants to shift over the boxes along with that stretch, right? That will be useful for some of our calculator, but not for this one particularly. Because for a fixed income, I want to know that I'm making the same amount every single month. That's why it's called fixed. All right. And just like that, we're done with our first row. And again, what should be able to happen, just to demonstrate, if I were to change this number, to like $50,000 or something like that, or whatever value I had, it automatically adjusts all the squares to be the same value. Let me change it back to 60,000. All right, so that's fixed income. A fixed income, again, is a reliable salary that will be the same exact value every single month. Very useful for a budget situation. Obviously, in many of your cases right now, you don't have that situation. What will happen and what the position you're in right now is that pretty much your income is what we call purely flexible. All right, which means it fluctuates month to month depending on how busy you are. You guys are in school right now. You're likely working a little bit less than you would during a summer month, right? Definitely less than what you'll be after you graduate. But even when you do, many of you that get a salary position in the future, like myself, I make a salary. I make a fixed amount every single month. Many of you will have a side hustle. You'll be doing something else where you're making money, whether you're making something and selling it, whether you're doing something like me where you coach and you make a little bit of a stipend on the side, or you're a musician and you make like a little bit of money on the side, whatever it might be. Many of you will be doing that on the side. So a flexible income row is also kind of important to have. But we're going to do this a little bit differently than the fixed income, because instead of taking some value and dividing it by 12, which would then fix that amount per month, instead, I'm going to have a bunch of different values for months that I want to add all together. And so here's what we're going to do. So in the month of January, for your side hustle, whatever it might be, maybe me as a musician, okay, maybe in the month of January, I made $53. I don't know. Tips on the corner of the sidewalk somewhere, I guess. Okay. Maybe in the month of February, I made $69. Maybe in the month of March, I made $345. Big month for me there. Maybe in April, I only made $21. Maybe in May, I made exactly $0. Maybe in June, I'm picking random numbers, by the way. So it's totally okay if you pick different ones. Maybe I made a big month this one. Maybe I made $545 and 32 cents. Okay. And just pick a bunch of random numbers, $120 in July, $100 in August, maybe $26 in September, $480 in October, maybe $14 in November, and maybe $0 in December again. Okay, I picked a bunch of random numbers. Okay. This is exemplary of a flexible income. Now, obviously, your numbers would probably be bigger right now if for those that have part-time jobs and stuff. It would be bigger, but you would still see kind of like a range of values over your calendar year. This is an example of a flexible income. Obviously, it's flexible because it changes month to month. So for this square, if I wanted to figure out what I made over the course of a year, the actual calculated part is pretty simple. Well, I just add up January through December. I get what I want. But how do I tell this to do it in a calculator? Okay. So here's how I do that. When I create a calculator, again, I start with this symbol, equals. I'm immediately telling the spreadsheet I'm creating a calculator. So here, what I'm telling this calculator to do is I'm going to tell it to add up a bunch of stuff. I'm going to add up a bunch of boxes, my January through February flexible income here. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to start with this capital S-U-M. Many of you will recognize that word as sum, being the answer to an addition problem. What that phrase immediately tells this calculator that it's going to do is I'm about to add up a bunch of boxes, okay? Rather than clicking on each individual box and adding it to each individual box, instead I'm telling the calculator I'm about to add up a bunch of boxes, right? And open up a parentheses. Parentheses is now preparing like, all right, here's the stuff I'm going to add up. If you click on the month of January, if I were to just click on January, it would only say like, all right, well, what's in January is going to be copied and pasted over here. But instead, I want to click and drag all the way through to December. So if I click and hold in January and drag through December, I'm telling the calculator to add up anything in these boxes. So if I go back to my calculator and now I close my parentheses, I'm done telling it what boxes to add up together and then hit enter. There's my total. It added up all those things, all 12 of those entries. And so for instance, if I go back in April, or we're in the month of November now, if this was actually my spreadsheet and I was like, all right, I made $14 on my last paycheck, maybe in this paycheck or like this weekend or whatever, I made another $50. So 50 plus that 14 would be 64 right there. Okay. You'll notice that automatically adjusted this guy too. Okay, so whatever values you put in here, and you can fiddle with them as much as you want. And for my student that asked me that question last period, for you guys right now, many of you would not have anything in your fixed income, but you would instead have everything that you're making in your flexible income, because part-time jobs typically pay that way, hourly or whatever. And then just as you get each paycheck, you're just adding it to the previous amount that you had in that box, and it's automatically adding up everything for you. Okay, but now we are officially done with our flexible income row. Next up, gross. Gross. Many of you have seen this term before, particularly those that have been getting paychecks from whatever job you may have. On a paycheck, you'll see a term that says gross income. All right. Many of you have also heard this term before. What does it mean? The analogy I give is this: gross income is the amount you make before government comes in and takes a big old gross bite out of your money. Okay. So in other words, gross income is like on paper, like many of you already know this, like if you make 15 bucks an hour and I work 3 hours, I should make 45 bucks. It's a simple multiplication problem. 3 hours times 15 bucks an hour, 45 bucks, right? And you may think like, great, I'm going to have 45 bucks in my paycheck. But for those that get paychecks, you know this. You don't get that 45. Instead, you get taxed a bit and you make a little bit less. So even though in your head, you're like, oh, wait, I should have 45 bucks. Instead, I only made 33. Okay, 33.72 or whatever it might be. That's where taxes come in. Right? And we'll talk about that in a second. But for right now, gross is simply just adding up all the stuff that you are making. So in this case, if my fixed income is 60 grand and on my side hustle, I made about 1,800 bucks. If I want to figure out what I made in gross, I'm just adding those two things up, right? So in this, again, I'm just going to do a simple calculator. And the reason I don't type in a number again is because what if one of the numbers changed? Then I got to go back to that box and readjust and stuff like that. So instead, I'm going to put in a calculator. Start with an equal sign. I'm going to add up just two things. Pretty simple calculation. I'm going to add up this fixed income. And I'm going to add shift, and you'll see the addition symbol on your top right part of your keyboard. I'm going to add in my flexible income and hit enter. Pretty simple calculation, but you should see those two things added together. All right, here's what we're also going to do. I want to figure out what I made in the month of January, February, March, all the way through to December. So here, if I go back to my gross income square, you'll see that bold box in the lower right-hand corner. I'm not going to put any dollar signs in my equation because now what I want to do is I want this calculator to move over month by month with its calculation. So I'm going to click and drag that bold box in the lower right-hand corner all the way over to December, and you will see each month by month totaled up for both the fixed and flexible income. If I go back over, what I've just done is I don't need this box. There's nothing in that row, right? So what you see is that if I were to go box by box, I can see the calculator that has in that little function bar. In this case, for the month of March, it says F4 plus F5. F4 and F5 are those two items. What I've done by clicking and dragging is I've shifted that calculator over to that month, so it only adds up that column, right? We didn't want that before because it was only based on what was in the fixed income square. In this case, we want it to shift over because it depended on the month, right? Okay, so that's our gross income row. It's becoming a little bit more complicated. And just to show you again, the power of a spreadsheet, we're still only in the beginning parts. If I were to change this fixed income total to say like $50,000, everything automatically adjusts. It's now doing a lot more calculations all at once. It's becoming more and more valuable of a calculator that we've created. All right, changing it back to 60,000. All right, so now taxes. Okay, I'm going to spend more time in the coming days talking about what taxes are, what they get applied to and stuff. For right now, we're just going to kind of generalize it, that you will be taxed. And part of that tax is depending on how much you make. Okay, so here in this country right now, not everyone gets taxed the same. Okay, in general, the more money you make, the more you get taxed. Okay. And it's not linear. And what I mean by the more you get taxed is this. For many of you right now that have part-time jobs, you get taxed at a pretty low rate, okay? Usually in the neighborhood of around 15 to 25%, depending on how much you make, all right? And 25% would be pretty high for you guys right now. If you made a lot more money, okay, like maybe you made $100,000 or something like that, you get taxed not only more because you made more, like a bigger chunk of your money is gone, but I mean like a bigger rate as well. So someone in your position right now as a part-time worker might get taxed at say like 16%. Someone that makes $100,000 gets taxed at a much higher rate, like 30% or more. Let me show you another resource right here. These are what we call 2020, for this year, 2020, but these are what we call tax brackets, all right? These exist every single year. They're released every single year by the IRS that basically tell you, based on how much you make, here's what rate you're getting taxed at, all right? And you'll notice some different ranges here. I'll go more into depth into this in the future, but looking back at our spreadsheet, our gross income is just shy of $62,000. Okay, that's what we made in total for this year, both fixed and flexible. Right, based on these tax brackets. For right now, you guys are all single. No one's married in here besides me, I don't think. So we'll go by the single column. Right, $61,000 or just shy of $62,000 fits into this category right here. It's within that range. Many of you are below that, and we'll talk about that moving forward. But again, within this range, you'll notice that your tax rate is 22%. That means the government's coming in and taking a 22% bite out of what you make. So I'm going to use that number. I'll talk about this more in the future, but depending on how much you make, and many of you will make a lot more than this, or some of you make a little bit less than this, in which case your tax rate also adjusts. All right? The less you make, the less you get taxed. The lower rate you get taxed. The more you make, the more you're getting taxed, the higher the rate. But for right now, 22% is what category this one falls into. I'll do some variations later in the week, but for right now, we'll use 22%. So back to our worksheet. So if I want to know what I get taxed out of this big amount, the big amount that I just made, I'm going to, again, create a calculator. I'm going to start with equals, and I'm going to take 22% of this value. So that gross income, I click on that box, and I'm going to take 22% of it. This is a calculation that we've done several times before in this class. If I want to take a percentage of something, I'm multiplying by the decimal version. The decimal version of 22% is 0.22. So I'm going to multiply, and the symbol for multiplication for the spreadsheet is Shift 8. You'll notice that little asterisk symbol or that little star symbol. That's the language for this spreadsheet for multiplication. I'm going to multiply by 22%. So 22% for me is 0.22. 0.22. I hit enter. It tells me what 22% of my income is. That's the chunk that the government's going to take out. I'll talk more about where that goes and why and stuff in the future. But for right now, just suffice it to say that's what I'm getting taxed on that number, which is a lot. $13,600. It's a big old chunk of my money that's gone to the government. All right. I'm going to do the same thing we did in the last one, where I'm going to take that bold box in the lower right-hand corner, and I'm going to drag it all the way through to December to represent what I'm getting taxed month by month. All right. Slide it back over. I don't need this column because there's nothing there. Delete it. All right. And so right now I have my taxes. The last row we're going to do for today is this net value. Again, another term that maybe you've come across before. On your paychecks, you will have a section that says net income. Gross income will always be bigger. Gross represents the amount that you make on paper. So if you make $15 an hour, they just simply do, all right, $15 times however many hours you worked. All right. Net income represents what's left over after the government has taken its bite out. So after you get all the taxes, all the deductions taken out, you're left over with some amount. That's always a little bit disappointing and always like, why did I bother working? So whatever's left over, that's what we call net income. The analogy I use is it's what you catch after government has taken its big old bite. So for that, it's just kind of a simple subtraction problem. But I'm going to do another calculator. Start with equals. And I'm going to take my gross amount, the amount I should have made, and I'm going to subtract out what I got taxed. So subtraction is just that dash symbol. Maybe you're familiar with that. I'm going to subtract whatever I got taxed. Enter. That's what's left over. The disappointing amount that's never quite enough for what you thought you worked for. And again, I want to do it month by month. So the bold box in the lower right-hand corner, click and drag that all the way through to December. This will be a common theme throughout the spreadsheet. A lot of click and drags, right? And again, I don't need that column, so delete it. And I have my income section officially completed. All right. Again, I'll go more into depth about where some of these things, particularly in the taxes, we'll talk a little bit more about that moving forward. I'll also demonstrate, like on a paycheck, what gets taxed and why and what that goes towards. But for right now, suffice it to say, this is what we will have for our income calculator. Tomorrow, we're going to start applying in the percentages that you customized, you fingerprinted yourself last week. But for right now, I'll go ahead and stop recording.